Before this story begins, take 1 second to subscribe. Because somewhere out there, another young person is losing hope tonight. And this story might be the reason they keep fighting tomorrow. Daniel Carter sat silently in the back of a crowded classroom while laughter filled the air around him. The teacher continued writing on the board, students copied notes, and life moved normally for everyone except him. Inside his torn backpack was a folded paper reminding him that his school fees had not been paid for months. He already knew what was coming, but nobody around him could see the fear slowly breaking him apart inside. That morning, Daniel stared at the classroom walls and wondered something dangerous. What happens to a dream when poverty finally wins? He was only 16 years old, but life already felt heavier than his future. And before the end of that week, everything would change forever. The sound of chalk scraping against the board echoed through the room while Daniel tried desperately to focus on the lesson. But his mind was somewhere else completely. Every word from the teacher sounded distant. Every second felt painful. Deep down, Daniel knew this could be the final week of his education. Around him, students discussed college dreams, future careers, and weekend plans. But Daniel was silently fighting the shame of knowing he might never return after Friday. He lowered his head whenever classmates talked about assignments because he could barely afford food at home, let alone tuition. Still, he copied every word from the board carefully, hoping somehow life would perform a miracle before it was too late. That evening, Daniel returned home to the small apartment his family struggled to survive in. The kitchen smelled of boiled rice, and weak soup stretched far beyond what it should feed. His mother stood quietly near the stove trying to hide her stress while unpaid electricity bills and overdue rent notices covered the old wooden table nearby. Daniel noticed her tired hands trembling slightly as she served food into tiny bowls. Nobody complained about the small portions anymore because suffering had become normal inside that home. Even silence felt exhausted there. Daniel forced a smile and thanked his mother for dinner, but inside, guilt crushed him. He hated watching the woman who loved him most slowly lose strength, trying to hold the family together. Late that night, Daniel lay awake inside his small room while voices whispered through the thin apartment walls. His parents thought he was asleep, but every painful word reached his ears clearly. His mother sounded worried. His father sounded defeated. They discussed unpaid bills, rising debts, and the impossible cost of keeping Daniel in school. The hopelessness in their voices terrified him more than poverty itself. Daniel pulled his blanket over his face as tears quietly rolled down his cheeks. For the first time in his life, he realized love alone could not protect a family from financial destruction. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, a young boy's future was slowly collapsing one conversation at a time. Daniel's father finally spoke the words nobody wanted to say aloud. "We can't afford his education anymore." The room fell silent afterward. Those words hit Daniel harder than anything he had ever experienced. He covered his mouth to stop himself from crying loudly. His father was not a bad man. He worked long hours lifting heavy boxes at a warehouse just to feed the family. But life had exhausted him completely. Daniel stared into darkness, realizing that poverty was about to steal the one thing he believed could change his future forever. In that moment, he felt powerless. Not angry, not bitter, just broken. The kind of brokenness that quietly destroys dreams before life even begins. The next morning, Daniel walked slowly toward school carrying his old torn backpack over one shoulder. Students passed him laughing, talking, and planning their futures while he struggled to control the storm inside his chest. Every step toward the building felt heavier than the last. He looked around carefully, trying to memorize everything. The school gate, the noisy hallways, the classroom windows. Part of him already knew he might never see them again. The morning sun burned above him, but Daniel barely noticed. Fear had consumed his thoughts completely. Still, he forced himself to keep walking because he wanted at least one more normal day before reality finally shattered his life. During second period, a staff member opened the classroom door and quietly called Daniel's name. His heartbeat instantly dropped. Students turned to stare while Daniel slowly stood up and followed the woman down the hallway toward the principal's office. The room felt cold when he entered. The principal avoided eye contact at first before explaining the situation gently but firmly. "Daniel, until the school fees are paid, you can no longer attend classes." Those words echoed endlessly in his mind. Daniel nodded silently because he could not trust his own voice. He wanted to argue. He wanted to beg. But deep inside, He already knew there was no money coming to save him. Daniel walked back into the classroom slowly while every student watched him in silence. He reached for the school badge attached to his uniform and carefully removed it with shaking hands. The room felt painfully quiet. Some students looked uncomfortable. Others whispered softly to each other. Daniel kept his head down because he refused to let anyone see tears forming in his eyes. His desk sat there filled with unfinished assignments and dreams that would never be completed. For a few seconds, he stared at the empty chair knowing his life was changing forever. Then, without saying a word, Daniel picked up his backpack and walked out of the classroom for the final time. Outside, the afternoon heat pressed heavily against Daniel's skin as he walked home alone through crowded streets. Cars passed loudly beside him. People hurried through life without noticing the devastated teenager moving silently among them. Daniel felt numb. Everything he once believed about his future now seemed impossible. College, success, stability. They suddenly felt like dreams designed only for other people. He stopped briefly near a roadside shop and watched students his age laughing together after school. That moment hurt more than he expected. For the first time, Daniel truly felt left behind by life itself. And deep down, a terrifying question echoed through his mind. What happens now? News about Daniel leaving school spread quickly through the neighborhood. Some neighbors showed sympathy, but many mocked him openly. Another dropout with no future. One man laughed while others shook their heads with disappointment. Teenagers who once studied beside him now avoided eye contact completely. Daniel heard every cruel word, every insult, every judgment. Poverty had suddenly turned him invisible to some people and worthless to others. He pretended not to care, but inside, the humiliation crushed him daily. At night, he replayed those voices repeatedly inside his head. Part of him started believing them. Maybe his life really was over. Maybe this was all he would ever become. Daniel locked himself inside his small room for hours each day after leaving school. The walls felt smaller than ever before. His old notebooks remained stacked in one corner untouched. Sometimes he stared at them for long periods, wondering how life changed so quickly. He barely spoke during meals anymore. His confidence disappeared slowly like smoke fading into darkness. At night, he would sit near the window watching distant city lights while imagining the successful lives other people seemed destined to live. But despite the sadness surrounding him, something inside Daniel refused to die completely. A tiny voice kept whispering quietly, "This cannot be the end of your story." One sleepless night, Daniel sat alone in darkness thinking deeply about everything he had lost. Suddenly, he realized something important. School had ended, but life had not. Poverty had closed one door, but maybe another path still existed somewhere beyond his pain. That small realization planted the first seed of hope inside him. Daniel wiped his tears slowly and stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror beside his bed. He looked tired, defeated, but still alive. And as long as he was alive, there was still a chance to fight for something better. That night, Daniel made a silent promise to himself. He would not allow poverty to decide the rest of his future. The next morning before sunrise, Daniel woke up with a different mindset. The pain remained, but something inside him had changed. Instead of feeling sorry for himself, he decided to move, to search, to try anything possible. He stepped outside into the cold morning air and walked through busy streets looking for any small job that could help his family survive. Pride no longer mattered. Shame no longer mattered. Hunger had taught him something powerful. Survival comes before comfort. Daniel visited stores, workshops, roadside stands, and restaurants asking for work wherever he could. Most people rejected him immediately, but he kept walking because giving up now would mean accepting defeat forever. By afternoon, Daniel finally found temporary work washing dirty cars beside a crowded roadside. The pay was terrible, but he accepted instantly. His hands became soaked with soap and muddy water while hot sunlight burned above him for hours. Drivers barely acknowledged him. Some tossed coins carelessly into his hands without even making eye contact. But Daniel remained focused because every dollar mattered now. Across the street, students wearing clean uniforms passed by laughing with friends after school ended. Daniel watched them quietly while scrubbing tires. A painful ache formed inside his chest, but he forced himself to continue working. He had lost school, but he refused to lose his future too. That night, Daniel sat on his bed counting the small amount of money he earned from washing cars all day. The bills and coins looked tiny in his hands, yet to his family, it meant survival for another day. Without hesitation, he handed most of the money to his mother during dinner. She looked at him silently before tears slowly filled her eyes. Daniel smiled weakly and told her not to worry. But later that night, after everyone slept, he stared at the remaining few dollars in his pocket, wondering how anyone escapes poverty when survival already consumes every ounce of energy. Still, something inside him refused to stop searching for a way forward. One evening after work, Daniel wandered into a small repair shop to escape the rain. Inside, he noticed old business books stacked carelessly near the counter. The elderly shop owner caught Daniel staring and allowed him to borrow one. That single moment changed everything. Night after night, Daniel began reading about successful entrepreneurs who started with nothing. Some were poor, some failed repeatedly, some never finished school. Yet they still built extraordinary lives through skill, discipline, and persistence. Those stories awakened something powerful inside him. For the first time since leaving school, Daniel stopped seeing himself only as a victim. Maybe success was still possible, just through a different road. One night, while using a borrowed smartphone with a cracked screen, Daniel discovered free educational videos online. His eyes widened with curiosity as he watched people teaching business ideas, digital skills, and phone repair techniques completely free. The internet suddenly felt like a secret world filled with opportunities nobody around him understood. While others slept, Daniel stayed awake learning everything he could. He replayed tutorials repeatedly until he memorized every detail. The tiny phone screen became his classroom now. Poverty had removed him from school, but knowledge was still available to anyone willing to search for it. And Daniel was becoming hungry to learn again. Daniel became fascinated with phone repair after realizing how valuable the skill could become. He watched tutorial videos for hours every night, studying damaged screens, broken batteries, charging ports, and software problems. Sometimes the internet connection failed. Sometimes the phone battery died suddenly. But Daniel always found a way to continue learning. He wrote notes carefully inside old-school notebooks that once held math assignments and essays. Now those pages contained repair diagrams and business ideas instead. Slowly, his hopelessness transformed into determination. The same boy who once cried over losing school had started building a completely new education for himself from scratch. One night, electricity suddenly disappeared during a heavy storm while Daniel studied repair tutorials online. Darkness swallowed the apartment instantly. His parents went to sleep frustrated, but Daniel refused to stop learning. He lit a small candle beside his bed and continued studying using the weak, glowing light. Sweat rolled down his face while rain pounded loudly outside. Most people would have quit for the night. But Daniel understood something important now. Successful people continue even when conditions are terrible. That candlelight became symbolic to him. The world around him might become dark, but as long as he protected his own small light of hope, his future could still survive. Some old friends laughed when they discovered Daniel spent nights studying phone repairs instead of searching for real opportunities. They mocked him openly. "You think fixing phones will make you rich?" one asked sarcastically. Others told him to accept reality and stop dreaming beyond his situation. Those words hurt deeply because part of Daniel still feared they might be right. But every successful story he had read taught him something similar. People often mock what they do not understand. So instead of arguing, Daniel continued practicing quietly. He collected broken phones from repair shops and experimented on them for hours. Failure after failure followed. Yet each mistake taught him something new. Thank you for watching this powerful story. If Daniel's journey inspired you even a little, subscribe now, like this video, and share it with someone who feels like giving up today. Remember, your current struggle is not your final destination. Sometimes the darkest moments create the strongest people. Keep fighting. Your story is not over yet. Going.